Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 114 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. Well, I've had a fantastic summer of travel and photography and photographing with friends and teaching my workshop in Italy, and now I'm back to my day job teaching photography at College of DuPage and back in front of the microphone for both Camera Position and, as some of you follow, my History of Photography podcast as well. And I've been doing some thinking about the creative act, and spurred on by a couple of things that podcast listeners have talked to me about via email. And one of them is the idea of freshness or avoiding the cliche. And I have had a really nice conversation with a really fine photographer named Greg Hull, who's local to my area here in the Chicago metropolitan area, and we've had some in-person conversations and some email conversations, and he turned me on to a podcast, actually not a podcast, but an audio recording that I obtained through the library, which was a history of ancient Rome. And I listened to that on and off throughout the summer, and it was really wonderful to acquaint myself with a greater depth of history about a place that I obviously love a great deal. And in one of the emails back and forth with Greg, he said something that I thought was really useful photographically. And that was, he said, one of the things I took away from those recordings about the Roman Empire is the way in which the empire combined what was best from previous generations and then made it their own. They did this in military tactics, art, literature, politics, leisure pursuits, architecture, really everything they did. They used information from other cultures as well as their own. It shows up everywhere. And then he went on to say that you could use this information to fuel the creative process. The idea of sort of going back in time and seeing what else someone has done. And then another email came across from Sharon Carlisle, and she was asking, the idea of how do you avoid cliche? Everything's been done over and over again. And boy, I come up with all kinds of different ideas of ways that we can try to avoid the cliche, and I think going back in time is perhaps one of them. I found a quotation by the great photographer and essayist Robert Adams, who said, the second thing I asked, and something you always have to ask with some caution as I looked at some work, was, what is this work fresh? None of us makes anything wholly new, but by the same token, art can't awaken us if it just copies what we already have. Ernest Hemingway said, if memory serves, that in art you can steal anything as long as you make it better. The qualifier is, obviously, important. You have to make it better. So, I think one of my goals as a photographer is to keep feeding myself with great images, lots and lots and lots of images. The more images I look at, the better at it I get, the better I get at looking at images. But I also think that the more images you feed yourself with, the less likely you are to make a photograph that is like one of those. And I think that the idea here is as many photographs you can see of trees. I don't know, I'll just pick trees out. As many photographs as you can possibly see of trees. The more you see, the more trees become sort of ingrained inside of you, and the more photographs of trees you see, the more different ways you see people who have approached this particular subject. And then when you get to that subject, you begin to think less about whether photographer X or photographer Y approached that subject in some way, but rather your way of approaching it. So in other words, all of the previous experiences sort of melt into one. And I think that has a lot to do with the ability to kind of think through the process of how you're going to go photograph that thing. Feed yourself so full that you can't possibly take another bite that isn't a bite of something new that you're trying out a new idea, a new approach, a new methodology. So reaching back into the past, feeding yourself with as many possible ways of looking at photography as you can, collecting books of photographs, going to museums and galleries that exhibit photography, looking at photography as we all can and I hope do on the web these days. And I'll put some links in the cameraposition.com blog as well as in the app to see if I can jog you to look at some really great resources of where to find photographs online. And obviously consulting your local library is really helpful. And college and university libraries, if you happen to have one in your neighborhood. I know that my library at College of DuPage is really rich with resources of things to look at. So that idea of going backwards in time and looking at how other photographers have appropriated each other and how we can appropriate their ideas and fill ourselves so full that we become fresh in some way. And going to that Robert Adams quote, none of us makes anything wholly new, but by the same token, art can't awaken us if it just copies art that we already have. So thanks for joining me. I am glad to be back in front of the microphone again and hopefully back on my once a week or so schedule of producing Camera Position. And again, for those of you who may not be aware, I also post a podcast of my weekly history of photography lectures at photohistory.jeffcurto.com, the class that I teach at College of DuPage. So we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.